Hi, I'm Torte de Lini. With the release of patch 7.37, many of your favorite support heroes have shifted away from being so aggressive and are more focused on repelling offlaners back and creating a safe area for their Safelane carries to effectively last hit. Heroes that can provide that kind of safety but also flash farm for large items before mid-game team fights are especially desirable this meta. So with that said, let's check in on which heroes are standing strong this patch according to my expertise and data from Dota2ProTracker.com. And by the way, my in-game hero builds have been updated to patch 7.37. Please enjoy with over 1,100 changes, so check them out in-game now. Well, it's finally happened. Tinker has found his place in the meta, and it's somewhere between annoying and irritating. As the meta for safe laners becomes less about laning aggression and more about stability, Tinker moves to the forefront with the changes made to him in 7.36 that render him a lot less offensive, but much more team fighting oriented, with the reintroduction of March the Machines, the removal of heat-seeking missiles, and rearm no longer resetting items. 7.36 also introduced one of the cornerstones in Tinker as a support, the Repair Bot's Facet, which gives double value for your March of the Machines. Instead of just doing damage to enemies in a massive AoE, which you usually rely on to split push waves, farm stack jungle camps, and break or defend high ground, it now also heals allies within its massive AoE and reach. The Repair Bot's Facet means you are healing your team for 45 per second for 6 seconds, but it's more like 10 seconds as the heal lasts an additional 4, so being hit by the final wave of the March of the Machines resets the healing duration of 4 seconds. Last patch, the March of the Machines and Repair Bot's Facet looked interesting, but by 7.37, we kind of saw the developers just run with that aspect and buffed it in 7.36a, 7.36b, including the Facet, and again in 7.37. So March of the Machines is this perfect storm with the meta where lineups are really leaning on flash farming position 5 heroes that can be both stable laners, but also goes ham on farm in the jungle to grab large items like Guardian Greaves, Pipe of Insight, Blink Dagger. So heroes like Veno, Treant Protector, Tinker come into the meta as they play both sides of that coin. These heroes have strong damaging abilities like Nature's Grasp, March of the Machines, and Plague Wards to really make farming fast and simple for them to get larger items like we talked about Guardian Greaves and like Blink Dagger, etc. All that said, Tinker does max out March of the Machines first, but does not really utilize it in the lane unless the enemy team dives hard on your core hero, and it's pretty obvious why as you end up pushing the lane and need to pull in order to reset it. The two other abilities, Laser and Defense Matrix, are much more appealing. For starters, you rely on Laser to guarantee last hits on range creeps, so the enemy can't deny them, or to blind the enemy pause 4 to make trades go more in your favor. Defense Matrix is self-explanatory as it gives stability for your carry so you don't get nuked on so easily and can shrug off debuffs relatively faster. In terms of item builds, this is where things get wild. Items like Null Talisman both give you harassing damage in the laning stage, as well as some intelligence to alleviate the cost of your spells. But when we look into his innate ability, Eureka, we can see a dual value in Null Talisman in that the intelligence it offers lowers your item cooldown, and that is doubled by the 25-minute mark when those Null Talismans offer 10 intelligence instead of the original 5. The item cooldown makes your next items, Holy Locket and Guardian Greaves, all the more potent as Holy Locket amps your healing to 58 heal per second, and not to mention the charges you get from Magic Wand upgraded to now Holy Locket is also on a lower cooldown, so you can continuously throw mana and heal at allies throughout a fight. Speaking of the pièce de résistance, Guardian Greaves is a no-brainer for Tinker. It dispels silences so you can continuously cast your March of the Machines with rearm. With Eureka, you can cast Guardian Greaves more regularly for your team, and its debuff, Mend, also has a lower cooldown thanks to Eureka. So now you have this insane backline hero that focuses less on the fights and more on ensuring his massive AoE March of the Machines is at least hitting your allies for the heal and poses no risk for you to cast. In terms of late game, it's basically more the same utility that Tinker has been offering. Glimmer Cape, Sight Device, Force Staff, Lincoln Sphere, items that let you do more for your team, gives more intelligence to lower the cooldown, and essentially allows you to permanently keep your team afloat with a whole array of utility. You're looking at a hero that effectively heals beyond most enemy lineups can deal damage, and with very few items to pull it off. I've completely redone the hero build, so check it out in game and let me know what you think. For the entirety of patch 7.36, Venomancer was one of the best heroes to play as a support because of his ability to set up easy kills in the lane with a level 1 Venomous Gale, the free level of Poison Sting as an innate ability. When it came to team fights, His Noxious Plague was hitting a stratosphere of obnoxiousness with the facet Patient Zero, which spread his ultimate twice over. So while the first enemy will be taking something like 300 initial damage from the Noxious Plague ultimate ability, it's the two others who receive the bounces that can lose up to 6% of their max HP as damage and are slowed for 50%. When the laning meta was about early game kills and aggression for Safelaner, Venomancer was such a great hero to pair with Chaos Knight, Brewmother, or Weaver. Now that we've shifted gears away from level 2 or even level 3 aggressions, Venomancer still stands tall because his ability now becomes about repelling offlaners back rather than setups, and we can see that in his new skill build where he now maxes Plague Ward first to flood the lane with harassment and force enemies to choose between last hitting, harassment, or destroying the Plague Wards. But to add to that, Venomancer's new 7.37 innate ability, Septic Shock, has moved away the necessity of maxing out Poison Sting for early game damage and instead grants Venomancer more base damage as magic damage depending on how many debuffs the target is receiving. So with Venomous Gale, Plague Ward's Poison Sting, as well as your own Poison Sting, yes that's right, 2 Poison Sting debuffs, you are already dealing 30% of your base damage by level 3, which is incredibly powerful. Throw in the 2 additional debuffs of Noxious Plague, and you are looking at a 50% increase in bonus base damage by level 6. And again, that bonus base damage dealt as magic damage, thus not reduced by armor. So it's no wonder players are picking the Plague Carrier facet, where his early game aggression turns into a one-man army of continuous slows, debuffs, and extra damage, since you can cast those Plague Wards on yourself as you slow and chase foes down the lane. And those negative effects and extra damage cannot be mitigated until the enemy buys some magic resistance, which is usually in later parts of the game. What's more is that it turns Venomancer from an even more efficient farmer, hitting some extra world record timings on items like Guardian Greaves at like 14 minutes, for position 5 mind you, and puts items like Vladimir's Offering all the more potent for Venomancer because Septic Shock amplifies your base attack damage, which coincides with Vlad's also buffing the damage. In terms of guide changes, I revised Venomancer's skill build to max out Plague Wards, swapped his level 15, 20, and 25 talents to align with the emphasis on Plague Wards, and I started recommending Plague Carrier facet in the title. Hey, by the way, need help with your game? Check me out live on Twitch where I regularly answer your questions daily while testing all your favorite hero builds. If you love the channel and want to see more videos, please like and subscribe. Over 83% of my audience last month were from drive-by viewers, and you could be part of the cool 17% who are subscribed. There's not much to mention about Treant Protector. In 7.37, they nerfed the appeal in getting your Ag Shard second because instead of your attack dealing 200 damage directly while shrouded in the Nature's Guise passive, you now deal only 175% of your base attack. So Ag Shard early on is not as potent as it is later in the game, as your base attack damage goes up, which diminishes Treant Protector's mid-game efficacy in damage dealing when ganking. The real appeal of Treant Protector is 2 parts. 1, Treant Protector still is so good in both great sustain in the lane with Leech Seed, but also aggression with his ability to activate Nature's Guise movement speed when casting Nature's Grasp, and his strong right-click power. Again, like most of everyone else on this list, he sets up for fights very early with 2 strong ranged flows and a gap closing bonus movement speed as well as a hard hitting attack. And 2, in 7.36, they moved his Nature's Guise to be his innate ability, but what is really appreciated is his new facet, Sapling, where it could be thrown on the ground to heal allies and hurt enemies. Now it doesn't slow in that area, but the range in which it affects heroes is fairly significant and gives Treant Protector more options during team fights without having to risk himself getting near an enemy to be able to pull off his Leech Seed cast. That was ultimately the challenge with Treant Protector, where his early game and mid game ganks were fantastic, but when it came to team fights, he was just not up to snuff compared to some other heroes on this list. The Sapling facet relieves Treant Protector from some awkward engagements in exchange for a Leech Seed that doesn't slow but damages all enemies and heals allies within range. So in short, the hero hasn't really changed that much, he's just very befitting to the laning meta and provides huge value. Not to mention that the hero farms also decently well with stacked jungle camps and Nature's Grasp, allowing him to pick up a Blink Dagger and Ag Shard. Grabbing an early Blink Dagger means you can gank comfortably with an initiating Leech Seed into a well-positioned Nature's Grasp to then use Overgrowth if your team still can't finish the enemy off. We talked about Sven in our dedicated video before, and it's still relevant in patch 7.37. The nerfs they made to the hero are impactful, but he still brings a lot to the table in this meta, where death balling and aura buffs are still key to a winning strategy. In 7.37, Warcry now gives less armor at its later levels, and the Ag Shard is no longer free bonus percentage based movement speed, but rather only when Warcry is active, which is really when it matters most anyways. To add, they also reduced his level 20 talent to a bit less armor, so overall the hero's mid-game armor provisions to the team are less, but not significant enough to make a dent in why this hero works. So what makes Sven still strong is that his armor provisions are still unmatched. By level 1, he pretty much shuts down most of physical harassment for your safe laner with the point in Warcry and the physical damage barrier with the heavy plate facet. By level 20, he is providing a whopping 20 armor and 22% more movement speed every 5 seconds when you take into account his level 10 and 20 talents. That's really it about the hero, because that's all there really is needed. When you take into account that your core off-lane teammates will probably pick up a Guardian Greaves, and you could be a good pipe insight holder as well, you'll see that your lineup is pretty much sufficient on movement, protection, and that leads to your mid and safe laners to become more comfortable on focusing on getting more damage output from fairly early on. What's more is that Sven needs very few items. Boosts a bearing for the 1.5 second of slow immunity on top of its movement speed buff that is amplified by the large percentage of an activated Warcry. So this means your team is zooming to initiate or regroup and push into the high ground of the enemy's base. This is especially appreciated in this meta where heroes like Underlord, Morphling, Leshrac, and Dragonite rely on their extra movement speed for positioning, as they're especially slow moving and unable to keep up against other enemy hero matchups or need to close the gap on ranged heroes. The one downside of Sven is that his laning stage as a safe lane support is pretty subpar. Sure, you are deterring the effectiveness of enemy off-laning physical harassment, but you have very little to offer in the lane until at least level 5 to give your Stormhammer some actual damage output and stun duration. But once you get past the dullness of the laning stage, you'll find the hero is fairly straightforward to succeed with. With everyone we mentioned, it is no surprise that Jakiro fits on this list, but when was the last time Jakiro was meta? The flaws of Jakiro are obvious. He's slow, his damage is great, but the range of Dual Breath and Liquid Frost or Fire are kind of short versus his Ice Breath or Macro Power, which are great catch and damaging abilities. Yet his benefits are amazing during the key focuses of a match, the laning and mid game stages. With the Liquid Frost facet, your attacks and abilities are amplified fairly nicely, and it means you enable the safe laner to either engage or disable the enemy offlaner from comfortably jumping your carry. So your first 2 levels are actually quite insane. Liquid Frost into Dual Breath effectively bolsters your Dual Breath's damage before even hitting level 3, where you slow your opponent for something like 40% for up to 45 seconds, allowing you to follow through on attacks that deal more damage, as well as the Dual Breath damage over time is being amplified. So in actuality, you have this tanky hero that can't be so easily blown over by harassment, but effectively punishes out of position for harassing heroes, trying to trade with you while also serving as a huge deterrent for offlaners who want to dive onto your safe laner. And because of how Liquid Frost works, you can still farm very easily with your Dual Breath on stacked jungle camps, making Jakiro actually a pretty great Greaves holder as he stays in fights for a long time, plays from afar, and naturally builds Arcane Boots with no other real items needed except maybe Force Staff or Glimmer Cape. In terms of team fighting capacity, his ultimate Macro Power combos actually pretty well with a lot of popular offlaners like Mars Arena, Underlord's Pit of Malice, on top of that 30% slow from his level 15 talent, and evidently Enigma's Black Hole. In terms of honorable mention, you could go all in on the safety of the lane and sustain in fights with Oracle or Io, but I want to give a special shout out to Omniknight. What a turnaround for a hero that had fallen to the wayside in 7.36 and even before that. In 7.37, they buffed Omniknight in a real way that really sets the standard of what you hope out of him as a support. For starters, 1, his new Ag Shard gives double purification with the 3-second delay at 75% effectiveness on the second one. It's actually such a godsend of an upgrade for purification. Now number 2, Repel now gives 60% magic resistance instead of needing the Ag Shard for it, which is again very much appreciated and a huge buff. And lastly, number 3, Hammer of Purity is back as a good harassment tool in the early game, and it scales into damage if you need it to down the road. Though honestly, you'll be seldom attacking anyone at the risk of your own life. And most importantly, number 4, Guardian Angel is now working as an AoE rather than target ability for yourself and an ally, which is especially appreciated in this meta where everyone's kind of clumped up. So it has basically a net benefit. But I can kind of understand how some people may have preferred the other Guardian Angel, where you can straight up keep your ally carry invulnerable to damage for like 14 seconds straight. So you effectively have a hero who can do it all. Keep your carry sustained in the lane, remove or outright block debuffs like stuns, silences, and slows with Repel, and protect your ally from big magic burst and regenerate that back. A large duration of invulnerability for you and your team, I kind of like the class Omniknight and Abaddon similarly, and while Abaddon has been the more prominent choice as a support in the past, Omniknight is looking much better now with his healing hammer facet, giving him some sustain when harassing, a much better farming tool with purification than Abaddon's aphotic shield, and Omniknight has a natural slow aura from his innate ability, Degen Aura, rather than being reliant on Abaddon's Curse of the Avernus slow, which stems from his attack. If you haven't fooled around with Omniknight yet, give him a whirl now, as you'll see in your matches will be pretty smooth, especially post laning stage. Alrighty, so that's it for support. Stay tuned for mid laners next, and let me know in the comments who you've been winning with this patch.